And as usual, I'm here to share with you everything that I sold online over the weekend in the past 48 hours on eBay. So kind of a tough weekend for me, not gonna lie. Gonna come at you very humbly and say that this was definitely my slowest weekend out of the last couple months, but I'm not gonna be upset about it because quarter four has been tremendously good for me this year, and not every weekend is gonna be as good or better than the last. I will, however, share why this weekend was probably a little slower, and then I'll get down to brass tacks and share with you what I sold. But as a reseller who is also growing, who's also always learning, I love to share some of the things that I could have done better with you, the viewing audience, and that's mainly for the people who are up and comers, people trying to get situated and get familiar with the reselling game. But for anybody out there who is already established, who's had success reselling, what I'm about to say you could probably attest to and you probably agree with. So as things have been slow this past weekend, I think a lot of that was just due in part to the fact that I have not been listing as many items daily for the past 2 weeks, and a lot of this snowball effect occurred the week of Thanksgiving for me. Because of the Thanksgiving holiday, I just did not source as many items, but the main reason was not just the holiday. It was because I got ill. I had a sore throat that turned into a full-blown respiratory infection, and so I was just down and out the week of Thanksgiving, and trying to manage and keep a business running when you're ill can be difficult, especially when you have sourcing goals as well as listing goals. And when you don't meet those sourcing goals, you often cannot meet your daily listing goals. At least that's how I try to operate with that type of outlook and that type of thinking. And so anytime things pull back for me in the sourcing department, I often will just slow down how much I have to list. Typically this time of year, I really like to list 7 to 8 items a day at minimum. And last week, as well as the week of Thanksgiving, I really was only listing about 5 to 6 items. And so just as the algorithm will see that you're listing more items and reward you, oftentimes when you pull back your listing amounts for several weeks in a row, the algorithm will sometimes punish you. And so that might be a big reason why I didn't have a whole lot to sell this weekend, or a whole lot of good sales. But again, sometimes this whole thing just works in a waveform pattern, and the algorithm can be up and down. And that's not to say I did have a lot of offers that I fielded this weekend, and I turned down a lot of offers. It always seems that in quarter four, people that are out trying to save some money because it's the holidays will hit me really hard for some low ball offers. And I did counter a lot of those low ball offers. And I'm the type of guy that typically will allow some good deals, especially on items that I've had sitting for a long time, or maybe items with an average sell price that's pretty low, or especially items with a low sell-through rate. I will typically move those items out the door. But it just seems this time of year, everybody wants you to give away your good stuff for nothing. And so beyond 15 to 20%, I typically try not to go past that on good items I know can sell. However, it was super slow this weekend. So when I get to sharing several of these items with you, I will admit there was a couple that I let go for $3 to $5 less than I normally would, but that's just to offset the slow nature of this weekend's sales. Now, several of the things I could have done to offset the slow nature of how much I was listing, and I'm gonna share this with you, and this has happened to me once about a year ago, very similar circumstances, is that you can offset having a limited amount of listings by having a big draft bank. Now, eBay will allow you to draft up a whole bunch of items and just put it in a bank, and then you can disperse those out as you like. I believe they give you 3 months to list those items. I typically am moving them out very quickly, but the idea behind the draft bank is, one, it's insurance. Two, it allows you to take a break. So that's number two. It gives you a day off, and I strongly suggest that. Sometimes working for yourself, you can find yourself doing it 5, 6, 7 days a week, and I can certainly relate to that. But is that your draft bank can act as a way to help sustain or give and lend to your daily listing amounts. So sometimes if I have a big draft bank and I only feel like listing 5 items that day, I can still 2 or 3 items from my draft bank, drafts I've previously made, and then I'll have 7 to 8 items to list that day. Being sick though the last couple weeks, I just burned up a lot of my draft bank, as well as doing a little bit of traveling out of town. I needed to use some of those drafts while I was on the road. And so the lesson for me, the silver lining on all of this, is that I know that I need to help hold on to more of my drafts towards the very tail end of the year. Typically, I start dumping them off the last few months of the year. I want to get credit for my cost of goods, and I typically zero out my draft bank. And then as the new year starts, I start building up another draft bank. But again, the lesson for to some of those drafts till the very end of the year in case I get sick, in case I get burnt out, or in case I just really need them. And so that is probably the big reason my sales dipped this weekend as well as even last weekend. But I remind myself with that mindset of abundance that I'm actually living something that I once dreamed about, and that is I am successfully working for myself. So anybody that's new to watching me, I am a smaller reseller. I operate out of northern New Mexico. And for anybody who questions, what my sourcing area is like, in my local town, I have and then I have a handful of small stores, but a lot of those thrift stores are privately owned or church-based thrift stores, and only a handful of those actually are very heavy on clothing, which is what I predominantly sell. So truly in my local area, I have one Goodwill and then maybe 2 or 3 smaller thrift stores that I do occasionally buy from. After that, if I want to try to source from any other place, I have to drive about 45 minutes north to a small mountain town in southern Colorado, and that town is Durango. Now, Durango and Colorado in general is really a mecca for good thrift store clothing, but unfortunately, because Colorado has become very famous for thrifting, prices have went up, and that's probably because there's just really great stuff to thrift also. And I think a lot of that is due in part to the fact that Colorado has a lot of wealth, and so those wealthy people are just donating better stuff. And it is a night and day difference between what I source here in northern New Mexico versus the quality of what I find 45 minutes away. But for anybody watching, if you've got 5 or 10 Goodwills within an hour's drive, I am jealous. But just understand as you watch and as you hear about my story, about my background, I am somebody who has very limited sourcing options in the winter. Now in the summertime, I kill on garage sales, yard sales, rummage sales, estate sales, you name it, sports fundraiser sales. And part of my business model is to buy in bulk in those summer months when I can find stuff easily, when I can source heavily, and then I just really like to backstock those items. I hold on to them, I give them real estate, and then I sell them on a higher value several months down the road when they're appropriate to list and appropriate to sell. But not gonna lie, this time of year can be difficult to source. And so for the simple reason things have slowed down for me was number one, I was sick. Number two, I should have had more in my draft bank. But let's go ahead and get down to the reason you're all here. I just wanted to share that with you so that hopefully it can become something you learn from and maybe don't have to go through as a reseller. And for anybody out there that runs a business, if you have one dimension of your business get off track, it can have that weird snowball effect. And one little hiccup in your business can cause a lot of other hiccups. And I am somebody that has only been running my small business for 2.5 years now. So I'm learning as I go. I don't mind anybody sharing with me any type of advice you have. Share in the comments, maybe some things you do to keep your business running this time of year, or maybe share with me some of your advice. If you come from a smaller market, there is a lot of different ways to source goods. I have sourced in a lot of those different capacities. I've done the traveling, I've sourced online, and there's different ways I could be coming up with goods, but just learning from it, I think, is the key. So now back to the reason I am here, and that is to share with you everything I sold. I love doing these, and come Monday, I've been making it a habit regardless of how many items I have to share with you. So first item up to bat, bread and butter item for me. This is a Burn Youth Work Utility Jacket. I sourced this bad boy over the summer at a yard sale for only $3. This guy here is probably more of a mid-tier brand. I wouldn't call Burn low tier, but I'm definitely not gonna give it Carhartt status. I will, however, say Burn jackets do sell well for me in women's, men's, and even youth. This jacket, I made sure in the title to put that it was duck canvas, that it was insulated, and that it was also quilt lined. I also made sure and noted that it had some color fade, very common with these work utility jackets. Not uncommon for them to have stains, especially in the adult sizes. And I also put that it was hooded. When it comes to the youth work utility jackets, I won't put all the same keywords in the description because obviously these kids aren't going to go out and do construction jobs probably. They're not going to be out doing electrician jobs, and they're not going to be out doing oil field jobs probably. But I will, however, put farm, ranch, I'll put shop hand, I'll put little helper, I'll put outside, outdoors, warm, and all of those things will just help to pump a faster sell. This jacket here, as I said, I paid $3 for, but it sold over the weekend for $24 plus $9.85 shipping. So happy to see it go. And again, like I said, I just don't use all the same keywords for the youth work utility jackets. Now, next item up, kind of a low to mid-tier brand, probably more in the low tier when it comes to work utility. This is a Lapco flame-resistant metal snap work utility shirt. I sourced 3 of these over the summer. I only gave a couple bucks a piece for each one of them. I've already sold the best one for like $27 several months ago, but I've been holding on to the last 2, and that's because they had some stains. They did have flaws, and again, it's not uncommon to see this work utility stuff, especially if it's used in the oil field, have staining. It can still sell, it's just not gonna sell for as much. So with this bad boy, it also had another stackable feature, and that was that it had camouflage, but it also had something working against it aside from the flaws, and that is that it had outside company logo embroidery stitched into the front chest. So it'll still sell, you just wanted to note that again in your listing. Be transparent. With this bad boy here, I used words in the title like flame resistant, safety clothing. I did put oil filled, and then other words I like to put in the description box would be construction. I'll put north slope for all those guys who work in the oil field in the north of Alaska. I'll put offshore for all those guys who work on those platform rigs out on the ocean, maybe down in the Gulf. And then I'll just put other work labor intensive jobs. I'll put pipeline, refinery, machinist, gas plant, construction. I probably said that already. Concrete finisher, electrician. And so again, a lot of blue collar terminologies, a lot of blue collar workforce jobs, a lot of the journeyman trade jobs. Flame resistant clothing will sell to those guys. So just be good. Take time to make sure you're listing your flaws. If it's an item that has that embroidery, make sure that you denote it, and then just put a ton of good keywords. So next item up, some vintage high waist Rocky Mountain jeans. Now, I typically list the colored Rocky jeans for a lot more money, but these here had a lot of shrink in the waist by about 2 inches, so I just denoted that. But these also had several holes and also some stains on the seat. So these Till bad boys from the 80s, they didn't sell for near as much. I think I sold them on an offer, and these ended up selling for $19 plus $7.95 shipping, and I only gave $2 at a yard sale. So happy to see them go. With the high waist jeans, oftentimes I'll put bareback, I'll put vintage 80s, 90s, I'll put horseback riding, farm, ranch, cowgirl, so on and so forth. All of those keywords, whether they be in the title or description, just help to sell the item. But moving on to the next piece here. Now, Lucky jeans are typically a very bread and butter brand for me. I love selling the Lucky brand jeans that are dark wash. I've sold a lot of the different series over the years. Now, I picked up several pairs of these over the summer. I think I picked up 2 pair. These are 410 athletic slim fit jeans. I picked up a dark wash pair as well as this medium wash pair. And again, I didn't pay much for them. I sold the dark wash pair for in the mid-20s very quickly. Now, these medium wash jeans had more stretch in the waist. So again, I just listed that, denoted that there was an excess in the waist and it didn't actually follow what the tag said. But these also had a few small spots. I was able to wash out several of the small spots, but there was still kind of a faint area where you could tell there was a stain. So I just listed it as it was. These still sold for me for $17 and I got $9.95 shipping. With Lucky brand jeans, I'll try to target that guy that's kind of the white collar preppy dude. I put business, travel, casual, original, and I always like to put the logo of just about any brand on any item in the description box. And for Lucky, it's Lucky You. I know that sounds kind of silly, but often you'll see that inside of the zipper. And so Lucky Jeans, always a solid seller for me. When I find these in the thrift store, they're often priced to the max. They might be $10.99 to $15, and typically I'll pass on them. But if I can buy into Lucky Jeans at garage sales for anywhere for $2 to $5, that's a good bet. These I did sell for less just due to the flaws, and also that they were the athletic slim fit. Slim fit jeans just don't sell quite as fast or as good for me. But what does sell good for me, again, is work utility. Now, this is not to be confused with the last jacket I shared with you when we started this. This is actually a Walls Tough Wear youth utility jacket. And this guy actually has Sherpa lining. And so I definitely put that in the description. And just like the burn jacket I shared with you earlier, this also has some color fade. Color fade is very common with canvas exterior garments, especially the darker tinted or darker dyed items. And so not uncommon for a Carhartt jacket that is black, that's been washed a bunch of times, or maybe it's green, to have some color fade. And you gotta really be careful with how you wash them. I've gotten away from using OxyClean when I wash a lot of my canvas outerwear because it can really add to the color fade. And while I love OxyClean to pull a lot of stains out of a lot of different items, it can be a little bit harsh on canvas. But this jacket right here, I picked up for $2.35 as part of buying a lot of clothing at a moving sale. And if you can buy in by buying in bulk, I suggest it. This was sourced over this past summer, and my good friend who I like to go sourcing out in my local area turned me on to this moving sale, so super grateful for his help. But this bad boy here sold for $21 plus $10 shipping. I have been holding on to this guy since the start of the summer, but again, I will just sit on a lot of my winter wear items. I'll sit on them for 3 to 5 months, and then the tail end of the summer, the early part of the fall is when I like to start to list my most expensive, most valuable garments. Oftentimes that's a lot of work utility jackets, heavy Carhartts. I list a lot of snowboarding pants and jackets, and then I try to taper down to the stuff that's less quality as the winter proceeds. And then as winter starts to move its way out, I start to list the spring and summer wear. And that's just how I run my business. I'm not saying that's how you should do it, but that's what's been working for me. And the more I pay attention to the seasonal nature of clothing, when it can be sourced, but also when it should be listed, the more I find I have more success in the transition of seasons. So I suggest if you're new to this, be paying attention to that. So once again, just a great jacket to sell for the kiddos. Didn't pay a whole lot for it. Certainly not the quality Carhartt is, but I find a lot of these lesser, lower tiered work utility brands out there, and Walls is one of them, Burn is one of them, Lapco, Key, there's millions of them out there. I just love Carhartt because it's kind of the original, and it does sell for the best when it comes to men's, women's, and youth items. So winding it down, just got a few more items to share with you. And this weekend was really strange. I did not sell any hard goods. It happens. About 85% of what I do sell though is clothing, but I love sourcing hard goods. It was just one of those weekends. It just didn't happen. So it's all good. I have less to have to worry about shipping off today. Now, this is a common seller for me, and I'm honestly shocked that this didn't sell faster or for more money. This is a Mountain Hardwear monkey fleece. I have sold this same jacket in the black colorway like 4 or 5 times. I've sold it once in a dark blue, and typically I always can sell these for about $25 to $30. Now again, some of that's based on condition, size, and colorway, but this fleece here, I've been sitting on since last winter, and I do believe I sourced it at the tail end of winter, so maybe that's why it didn't sell, and maybe I'm just being impatient. But I did go ahead and I let this sell for a lot less than I normally would. This here sold for $17.80, and I did charge $7.50 shipping, but fortunately I only gave $6 for this at a garage sale. Now that's kind of paying up because oftentimes at garage sales I can pick up fleeces for $2 to $5, but I still love Mountain Hardwear. This had a lovely color. It was in great condition. I decided though late last night, as slow as the weekend had been, I would be a little more liberal with the last few offers that I was given, and this was one of them, so I definitely let this go. I could have sat on this and maybe made $3 to $5 more in the next couple months, but when sales are slow, I'm gonna be liberal and I'm gonna let some things go, and that's just what I gotta do to keep the ball floating and keep this ship sailing. All right, Burton snowboard pants. These are some big boys here. Not gonna lie, these are pretty beat up, and I did pay up on these. Paid $12.99 at a thrift store a few months back for these, but I know Burton, and I know Burton sells. These were not of any specific line. They were an older style. They weren't the dry ride. They weren't Shaun White. They were just very basic, and they did have some wear on the back lower leg, some fraying on the bottom of the pant legs. That is very common, not uncommon to come across snowboard pants with scuffs and scratches on the seat and on the lower leg. These things just get used. These guys go tumbling down the mountain, and if it's icy, their equipment or the ice itself can scuff up the garment. So just be good about listing it. I did, however, sell these for $46 plus $11 shipping, so I'm happy to see them go. And anytime I list anything Burton, I want to try to put the type of series, whether that's Shaun White, Dry Ride. Recently, just a few months back, I sold a Burton jacket, and it was a collaboration with Gwen Stefani's brand Lamb. I sold that jacket for over $400, which was sweet because when I sourced it, I only thought it was like a $100 Burton jacket, but when I got it home and priced it, my jaw dropped. But I waited for a few months to list it, and then I sold it immediately. So just be good about, again, denoting the flaws. When I put words in the title, I'll also try to list if it has any upgraded materials. Sometimes Burton might have Gore-Tex in it. Maybe it's got a satin lining. Maybe it's Sherpa line. Whatever it has that maybe makes it a little bit different from your average jacket, that's where I'll try to accentuate that feature. But then in the description box, I'll just go back through with a lot of my winter sports words. I'll put snowboarding, skiing, I'll put snowshoeing, I'll put winter sports activities, I'll put outside, outdoors, dry, warm, windproof, waterproof, so on and so forth. Happy to see these go. Burton is a staple of my store. And so here's another item I let go a little cheaper. This was the last thing I sold last night before I went to bed. Somebody had been sending me some offers ever since I listed this earlier last week, and I know they wanted it pretty bad. I don't know if they wanted it to give as a gift or for themselves. Typically I can sell these for $35 to $40, but this is a Carhartt women's soft shell vest. I love Carhartt. If you've watched me in the past, you know I come across a lot of Carhartt, and you know how well it sells for me. But this Carhartt vest, being it was soft shell, won't go for near as much as the duck canvas style. And women's Carhartt vests typically don't sell as fast as the men's ones. That's just the reality of it. But this here, I knew somebody was looking at it. The offer they gave me last night was suitable, and so I took an offer of $30 plus shipping on this. I did, however, pay up on this item. I sourced it just last week, and I paid $13.99. So I'm not gonna lie, I wish I would have got $5 more out of this, but that's okay because I want to have some money to buy more stuff this week. So I'm happy to see it go, and I knew that it would sell good for me and sell fast, especially if I priced it competitively, and so on and so forth. So with Carhartt, just remember, use all those work utility keywords. With women's Carhartt, a lot of times I'll still use them because there's a lot of women who work in the industrial fields. But sometimes with women's Carhartt, I will put chore, barn, I'll put outside, outdoors, I'll put horseback riding, and that's just because women who wear Carhartt are Carhartting different than men. So just a little take on it. Now, another bread and butter, LL Bean. These are LL Bean women's ski pants. These are very basic, no upgrades to these, very simple, just black colorway, which is a good color, but these were size small, so probably not the best size, but they were in great condition. I do believe these were vintage, so I listed them as vintage. What you want to look for, though, with most vintage LL Bean is that white off yellow tag, and it'll say Freeport, Maine. I love LL Bean outerwear. It sells really well for me. Just don't pay too much for it. I find it a lot because I live so close to Colorado, and Colorado folks love LL Bean. It's just it's GORP, it's outdoor apparel at its finest, and it's affordable. So it's not super, super high end. And so these here sold for $27 plus shipping. I bought these at a local thrift store and I only gave $3 as part of a $5 fill-a-bag sale. So I'll turn $3 into $27 all day long. And just like with my Burton apparel, any type of snow gear, ski gear, I'll put winter wear, warm, dry. I'll put skiing. Sometimes with the skiers, I might put the different types of skiing because there's tele skiing, there's cross-country skiing. And so just use your imagination. Again, keywords and putting a little time and investment into adding more specific keywords will help. And I'm winding it down. Very last item to share with you, not a brand I was super familiar with. I looked this up. It didn't have a tremendously high sell-through rate, but I sourced these for a couple dollars at the very last yard sale I went to about a month and a half ago. These are Judy Blue. They are a plus size, but they have that distressed look. They had the factory fraying at the bottom. And so for what I paid, just a few dollars, I figured I could probably make somewhere between 15 to 22 bucks. And I actually sold these for $21 plus $9.50 shipping. I didn't put a ton of keywords other than just accentuating what it looked like, and that was that it had the factory distress, had the holes, that they were baggy, that they were wide leg, and that they were plus size. And so happy to see them move because I really haven't had these listed for maybe a month. But that's it, my friends. A little bit slower, not much of a haul to share with you, but again, this is reselling. It's up, it's down, and I'm glad I got to share with you an honest outlook on what I could have done to have made my week's sales better this past weekend. Sometimes we get sick, sometimes we have to learn from our scenario and from our circumstances. I find that to be true not only with business, but also with life. So I'm gonna go ahead and wind this one down. As always, if you like this video, please reach out there, hit that like button, turn those notifications on. I love sharing my sourcing videos as well as I make shorts every few days on what I sold overnight. And so please follow me at The Underground Safari. I'd love it if you'd subscribe. Until next time, my friends, I'm out.